Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about a topic that I saw on the Cardfight Vanguard social media landscape, and that is that in Overdress, triggers are much more impactful than in the other formats that we've had in the past. So you might be thinking, well, duh, of course they are, right? It's Vanguard, it's all about triggering, right? If you don't trigger, you're just going to lose. But the answer to both is yes, right? And we're going to kind of go into it, just kind of talk about it, and discuss why. And the answer is pretty much just shield values. So let's kind of talk about just shield values in, well, just talk about basically deck construction and shield values in D, V, and the way back OG format. So we've got D, and then we've got V, and then we've got the OG format. Way back, cross rides, 5k triggers, the old school, right? So let's kind of talk about deck construction in V, for example. So in V, we have like 16 triggers, right? 16 triggers. So pretty cool. There we go, triggers. And then we have like 14 grade 1s, 11 grade 2s, and then like around like 8 grade 3s, right? So these are basically everything with shield value in the deck. So this is around 30 plus 19. And then we have one first Vanguard, which is basically, we don't have to care about that because this has no shield value. It's not on the deck. We don't have to worry about it, right? Now, how much shielding does this deck have, do you think? In 16 triggers, right? 4 of them, remember, in V are PGs. So there's only 12 cards that are probably around 15k in shield value, right? So that's around 180,000. That's 180,000. Let's use another kind of color for this. So 180,000 shield, right? 180,000 shield. Should be correct. Should be correct, right? We can use a calculator. All right, so let's kind of bring this here. So 12 times 15,000. There you go, 180k. That's 100k worth of shield value, right? Then in grade 1s is actually very easy. This is like 14 times 10k, right? 140k, 140,000. Pretty good. And then 11 grade 2s, right? Grade 2s have 5,000 each, so this is around 55,000 shield. And then in grade 3s, we don't have anything, right? These are 0. Well, technically speaking, Healed Guardians are grade 3s, but let's talk about the standard grade 3s, and that is the 0 shield grade 3s. And we basically have 0 there, right? And of course, these lineups can change. Grade 1s have been cut to maybe 12 sometimes, and the grade 2 slot's been upped, and the grade 3 slot's been upped because there's always just like good grade 3s and grade 2s that have gotten released. But the most standard format we have here, let's kind of look at that. That gives us around 375k shield, right? 375,000 shield. Pretty good amount of shield, right? That's nice. That's a nice baseline we have. Now let's kind of talk about D, right? D is a bit different, right? D, we don't have D, we do have 16 triggers, of course. It's always 16 triggers. But the rest of the deck is weird, right? Triggers. You have 4 PGs, right? You have 4 PGs. And then you have everything else, right? And you have to bear in mind there's only 46 cards in D because we have 4 cards in the ride line, right? So after this, after these 16 triggers, there is around like 30 cards? No, 20 triggers. So there's like 26 cards that, have basically around 5k shield because in D, grade 1s only have 5k shield and grade 2s only have 5k shield. Let's kind of cut like the Persona Ride numbers. So let's say, we have 3 cards in Persona Ride in the deck. So that makes around 23. And then there's like 4 other cards, maybe other grade 3s that we run that don't have shield. So that makes like the deck count to like probably 19 5,000k shield, right? 19 5k shields. 5k shield cards. All right, so that's pretty much everything in D. And if we kind of cut down on like what is like 3 Persona Ride, 3 Persona Ride, and then 4x like grade 3, for example, right? That's basically everything in the deck, right? 20, 42, 46, and then 4 ride line, right? So how much like shield value do we have in D? So with this, let's talk about 5k shields. 5k shields are easy. 19 times 5, right? 19 times 5 is 95k, right? So 95k is here. And then here in Persona Rise and grade 3s don't have anything. We have 4 grade 1 PGs. Those don't have anything. And then in the trigger lineup, we have around 8 crits, right? 8 crits. So that's, I think it's 90k, right? 8 crits. Doing maths is bad. Bad idea. But yeah, that is no, that's 120k. My bad. So 120k, 120,000. And then we have like we have 4 heals as well, so that's 60k, right? 4 heals, that's 180. And then we have like, usually people run 3 draws, so that's 10k, 30k. Usually if they're at grade 3. And then we have 1 over trigger that is 50k, right? 50k. So let's kind of add that all up, right? That should give us a good amount, 180,000. And then plus, 80,000 there, right? And plus 95,000. So here we go. We have all up, we have around 355,000 shield, right? Okay, so since we finished D, let's have a quick look back at OG. What was the OG like? So OG basically had the same lineup as V, right? In fact, I think V has like slightly more radical lineups, but OG is pretty much the same. But back then, we only had 10k shields as triggers, and people all ran like 5k draw shields as well for the trigger lineup. So around like 16 triggers, you'd have 12 that are 10k, right? Which is very easy. And then 4 that are like 5k shields because they were draws. People ran like 8 crit, 4 draw, 4 heal, very standard lineup. And then the grade 1 and grade 2 lineup was pretty much similar. So we have 25x 5k shields, right? That was basically the gist of the whole thing, right? So if we add that all up, right? We have 120,000 right there, and then we have 20k on the whole trigger lineup, and then we have 25 times 5k, which is well, I'm gonna be accurate here, 125k shield. So if we do that, right, we have around 265k shield. So let's kind of just talk about these 3 things that we found. So we look at the OG format way back. Wow, that has no shield power, right? 265k. It was way lower than everything else. But that's fine, right? Back then, triggers were 5k. That's huge, right? Hitting numbers, hitting for like a 15k guard was basically the game, right? It was basically the game. And people would pay CB2 to like retire 1 card. Or CB2 to draw a card, right? So the long story short, the power level back then was very, very low. And, the low shield value for that low power is fine, right? If you CB2 in, nowadays, you're basically getting, 2 billion K, you're getting 50 crits, you draw, 3 cards, etc. Back then, no, that wasn't the point, right? And, like I said, low shield value for that time is fine. The lower shield value for that time is fine, right? But then let's kind of look at DNV, and this is where I think the main comparison should be, right? Because I'm going to talk about some topics here, and it's going to make a lot of sense, I think. So, biggest difference between V and D, right, is that the grade 1 slot has shield value that, in D you don't really have, right? They're all 5Ks in D, and your PGs are there. Well, in V, they're all 10Ks, and 10K shields are really, really good, right? For example, you'll have times in D when hitting a 10k shield is a good number, because it is. There is no good way to guard in D to guard 10k. Unless you have the effect draw, right? Or you have, a special card that gives more shield, or you overguard with a crit or a trigger, right? Or you just suck it up and, guard with 2 cards, right? But otherwise, in V, you just throw a card, you draw grade 1, and you're fine, right? You're actually just fine. Coupled with the fact that, if you look at D, right, there is a lot of shield in this 1 over trigger. Look at this. 50k shield right here. This is a lot of shield. 50k. So basically, if you don't have the over trigger, right, if your over trigger is gone, you've lost 50k shield. Of course, you might have survived a turn, but then if you also never draw that over trigger, you're missing out on a lot, right? You're missing out on you're just missing out on a lot, right? While in V, your defensive power is kind of more evenly split, especially at that grade 1 slot, right? And then lastly as well, right, power hasn't really decreased in D, right? V kind of introduced kind of a new standard power level in a way, and D hasn't really kind of lowered that power level. You're still getting a lot of power for like, like Persona Ride, for example. Bam, front row 10k. Yeah, what are you gonna do, right? Bastion, everyone gets 10k, everyone is dead, you go first and win, right? So yeah, power level really hasn't dropped that much. The other subtle thing as well is that in V, you draw more cards early game, right? Your first Vanguard lets you draw a card, and then if you're second, you get to get a quick shield as well. While in D, you just don't get to draw a card if you go first. So you just have less cards in hand. And of course in V, the format has been around for a very, very long time. So, there's more effects out there that does let you get more advantage. But overall, yeah, in D, you still just draw less cards, and then in V, you draw more cards. So let's kind of combine them all together, right? Power level, still high. In D, all your shielding is in your trigger lineup, right? Because everything else is a 5k, and your overtrigger is 50k, right? And then now, like, if you trigger as well in V, right? You give something 10k, right? So let's talk about an arbitrary number, 23,000. Beautiful number in both formats. You give a 10k trigger to your card, becomes 33k. How does your opponent guard that? 15 plus a 10 in V, but in D, 15 plus the non-existent 10k, so it has to either be 15 plus a effect draw, right? Or a front trigger plus a 5k, or you're throwing away 15 plus 15, or a 15 plus 2 5s, right? So your shielding options have also lowered, right? So now when you actually trigger, it's slightly more impactful. But let's kind of even talk about the earlier game. And that is where the blowouts are really going to happen, right? So early game, you drew one less card. Big. Actually big. Your opponent crits you. Creates a good number, right? Suddenly, you're just going to eat a bunch of damage and probably die really, really quickly. And that's where this feeling comes from. The feeling of trigger reliance, can't do anything about it. People making 10k guards in the early game. What are you going to do against 10k guard in the early? Your draw triggers don't even activate. You have to 2k guard. You have to get a trigger early. Be able to kind of survive that efficiently, right? Yeah, it's a big feels bad, right? It's a big feels bad. So how do you actually fix this? How do you actually make this better? Well, the easy thing is you just have to distribute your shields to other parts that is not triggers, right? Because again, remember, if you trigger a card, you get a card in your hand. So you get to put 10k somewhere, and you get that 15k shield in your hand, and then if the other guy like doesn't get, a trigger, then bad times, right? Bad times. So by triggering, you're also winning more, right? So let's kind of distribute more shield across the board, right? I think D should have at least the same amount of guard value, if not more, compared to V, right? But you want fast games, you want games to finish quick, you want people to just automatically die, then just give less shield value, right? But yeah, if they distribute the shield value more, it will help it out. If there's more options as well to survive the early game, like a heal guardian, for example, would be very, very nice, then that would also help out those blowouts as well. Because V wasn't built in a day, you have to remember that. V took a while. And we always had first turn problems with V. Well, player going first, very, very strong. We still kind of have that issue, but it's much more lessened now with something like a heal guardian. D really needs something like that, I think, in order to make you survive the early game better, right? And then, I don't know, over trigger, 50k shield. That's cool. That's cool. But again, if we can just kind of move that away, well, I think we talk about over triggers a lot of times, how impactful it is. Well, it's made its impact once again, right? And this time it's not taking a damage as the OT or triggering the OT. It is just by existence. 50k shield in your hand is incredibly, incredibly strong, right? So those are kind of my thoughts on why, D does overdress. D feels more trigger reliant than the other formats in a way. And, that's where the feeling is coming from, right? That's where the feeling is coming from. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you have any weird topics you'd like me to maybe talk about, post them there too. I'll have a crack at it. I'll take a look at the interesting ones. But these are basically my thoughts, and maybe this is kind of explained to you why it feels that way. Right? It feels that way. Right? See you all in the next video. Right, bye.